The least I can say about the July 2019 ban list is that it's absolutely insane. Not only did so many broken cards get restricted, but a ton of older cards got unrestricted, which makes it really interesting. In today's video, I want to talk about 10 rogue winners from this ban list, and in the past, I've only done 5 of these, but there are so many cards that are now off the ban list, or at least less restricted, that I just have to talk about all 10. I don't know if all of these decks will instantly top a bunch of tournaments, but they do have a lot going for them. In some cases, it's that they have cards that are now less restricted than before. In other cases, they have bad matchups that are now gone. And in some cases, in a couple of them, you have both of those situations where not only is the deck better off by getting cards back, but also some of its worst matchups are now out of the format, or at least more restricted in the format compared to last one. As always, if you guys would like to purchase any of the cards or decks that I talk about in today's video, make sure to use my link to tcgplayer.com in the description below. That not only gets the cards for you guys, but also helps support the channel directly. You guys absolutely killed it last week. Like, I just was blown away by all of the sales from Battles of Legend. So make sure if you're looking for cards now that the ban list has changed to use that link, because like I said, it goes right back into the channel. Anyway, we have a ton to talk about, so without further ado, let's jump right into the 10 rogue winners from the July 2019 ban list. At number 10, we have Gravekeepers, and this is an excellent example of some of the things that I was talking about in the intro of this video. So Gravekeepers not only got direct support on this new Forbidden and Limited list by having Royal Tribute go from 1 to 2, but also they got a ton of indirect support, because one of the things that happened is that Solemn Judgment went to 3 copies per deck, and that's a pretty big deal, because you're going to notice a pattern in this video. There's a lot of controlling strategies that can take advantage of Solemn Judgment, but not only do Gravekeepers have Royal Tribute, not only do they have Solemn Judgment, not only have they just sort of recently gotten a bunch of new support, but also Necro Valley is just really well positioned for the upcoming format. The actual Gravekeeper cards are a little bit slow by 2019 standards, but Necro Valley in combination with 2 Royal Tribute and 3 Solemn Judgment might just be enough to make this a viable rogue option. At number 9, we have Cliffforts. Did you know that as of this ban list, there are no Cliffort cards on the entire list? Towers is completely off of it, Sacrifice is completely off it, and as of today, well, I guess a couple days ago, Cliffort Scout is also off the ban list. There are no archetypal Cliffort cards that are on the Forbidden and Limited list, and that's a pretty huge deal. Now, don't get me wrong, they are missing a lot of things since when they were really competitive. You don't have Vanity's Emptiness or 3 copies of Skill Drain, but there are tons of other Floodgate cards that you can play in this deck, and while there isn't Master Rule 3, which definitely is a pretty big hit to Clifforts, I still think that some form of the deck might be viable. Maybe even you go like the Towers Turbo route with using like Storm like they used to back in the old days when Clifforts were like really reigning supreme. Overall, while Clifforts might not be the best stun deck out there, it is pretty crazy that we now have all the cards unrestricted, and I think at the very least some players that were holding on to their Cliffort cards while Scout was still restricted will want to give the deck a try either at regionals or locals. So definitely if you're playing at those events, make sure you have back row disruption ready. Maybe not necessarily just for Clifforts, but I think that one of the things we're going to notice as we go into the next format is that there's going to be a lot of back row decks running around, especially at the lower tournaments like regionals and locals, so you definitely want to make sure you actually have some ways to deal with those strategies. At number 8, we have Infernoids, and this deck is really scary now that Monster Gate is at 3 copies per deck. By using Monster Gate, you can mill like most of your deck depending on how many normal summons you're playing. I think that could make Infernoids very viable for next format. They already have really good archetypal support cards. You know, Void Feast is one of the craziest trap cards if it resolves, and Void Imagination is like a Shaddoll fusion that sends 8 monsters to the graveyard, or however many monsters it sends. There are so many powerful cards just in the Infernoid archetype, and Monster Gate could just be one more powerful spell card to an already good deck. Infernoids have proven their success at competition before, and I think it's safe to say that with 3 copies of Monster Gate and the right format conditions, Infernoids could be very scary in the coming months. At number 7, we have Necroz, and I know that only one change was made to this deck with this new ban list, and that's that Shriek goes from 1 to 2, but I think that might be big enough to really push this deck, and a lot of people have already been playing Necroz since they got Shriek back. I mean, it's so close to topping a bunch of YCSs. I saw so many bubbling deck profiles with Necroz players using incantation cards and all of like the modern modern era support for this strategy, and I think that this could be like one last push before Unicorn finally gets unrestricted to where this deck could be a viable strategy once again. And then we have hero decks, and I don't know which type of heroes will end up being played. I think that the new vision heroes are very likely going to be a positive influence on the overall hero strategy. Maybe as a rogue contender, we'll see like a vision hero deck, but especially now that Stratos just went to 2, which is pretty insane by the way when you think about it, because Stratos has been at 1 for like 10 years, and I've never even been playing this game when it wasn't at 1 copy per deck because Airblade Turbo only lasted for like 2 weeks. Stratos going to 2 copies per deck is pretty nuts, especially in combination with these new vision heroes, as well as super polymerization at 3 copies per deck. Maybe you can play some of those elemental hero fusion monsters that you can make with like a dark attribute or a water attribute, whatever you feel like was good against like the current format. But overall, I think heroes are very well positioned, especially because they got so much new support in combination with these new Forbidden Limitless unrestrictions for cards that they used to play. Some of the best-selling cards from Battles of Legend, Heroes Revenge, were the Vision Hero monsters, so I think a lot of people are really hyping up for this deck, so expect to see a few hero players, or maybe more than a few hero players, at the next regional qualifiers. At number 5, we have Cyber Dragons. Now, this deck does not directly get supported by the Forbidden and Limited list, but it already has proven itself time and time again, especially in the last 2 years, to be a pretty viable rogue contender. And there aren't that many Cyber Dragon players, but I've noticed especially over the past couple years that there's like a really dedicated small fan base of competitive players that are playing Cyber Dragons and seeing a ton of tournament tops, and that's really, really cool. Cyber Dragons just got the new Salamangreat All Mirage Link monster, which is very helpful as a nice Link 1 they can make with a lot of their normal summons, while also providing them a downward pointing arrow, and that in combination with the rest of the meta taking hits means that Cyber Dragons are likely going to still be a powerful rogue contender going forward. That brings us to number 4, which is the first of 2 Orcus variants that I'm going to talk about in today's video, and this is Zombie Orcus. Now, you might have not heard about this deck. It was experimented with back when Orcus first got their second wave of support with Dingirsu, but it sort of fell out of competition after that, and it still saw some play. It's a pretty viable deck, and especially now that the more pure version of Orcus has really taken a huge hit with Rusty getting banned and Light Stage getting limited, I think that more Orcus variants are going to pop up in the next format, and one of those very well could be Zombie Orcus. They have a lot of powerful zombie cards at their disposal, as well as the Orcus cards, which are really good at setting up big boards and OTKing their opponents, but also you now have super polymerization at 3 copies per deck, and zombies are one of the best decks that can use that because of Zombie World. With Zombie World on the field, you can use super polymerization to remove any 2 of your opponent's monsters and summon Nether Soul Dragon from your extra deck. That card just got reprinted, so it seems like Konami knew this was going to happen. They knew they were going to put super polymerization at 3 and they wanted to support zombies, so it makes sense if you're playing a zombie deck to have super polymerization, because zombies can now use super poly better than any other deck, because usually super poly has to be used against specifically dark decks or Salamangreats or something that you're actually playing specific fusions in your extra deck to use. But with zombies, you can just use any 2 monsters, and that's something that most decks can't do. So I think Zombie Orcus is going to be a very viable rogue deck going forward. I don't know if it'll be the most popular Orcus variant, but I think that it's safe to say it will see competitive play. At number 3, I hate to put this one on this list because I hate this deck so much, is True Dracos. And True Dracos, I know they got a little bit of a hit because Terraforming went from 2 to 1, but I still think that they're looking good going forward. True Dracos have always been a very good stun deck. They have Monarchs Erupt, they have There Can Be Only One, all sorts of crazy floodgates in combination with already good engine cards, but especially now that Solemn Judgment went to 3 copies per deck and Salamangreats took a huge hit to consistency and longevity, which was probably one of True Draco's like worst matchups. That matchup was really tough for them because Salamangreats have so many cards that destroy back go or shuffle it back into the deck. I think that True Dracos are looking very good right now because of the Solemn Judgment thing, but also because their biggest matchup is now gone from the metagame, or at least it took a huge hit in the meta, right? We don't know how good Salamangreats will be going forward, but as someone that played Salamangreats, playing without 2 copies of Gazelle and 2 copies of Circle is going to be pretty rough, especially against decks like True Dracos where you need to use like all of your cards to shuffle back all of their back row. If you don't draw consistent hands, it's going to be a very tough matchup and what used to be a pretty easy matchup, at least in my opinion. At number 2, we have yet another stun deck, and that is Guru Control. Once again, this deck took a slight hit from Terraforming because Terraforming went from 2 to 1, and now you can't search Hidden City as consistently. But overall, I think the Solemn Judgment change is going to help out Guru Control so much. Just every single stun deck out there has benefited from Solemn Judgment going to 3 copies per deck. It means that you have 2 more outs to Twin Twisters or Red Reboot or Evenly Match, and in the case of Guru Control, it was already sort of like the most successful stun deck of the past couple months, so I think now with 3 copies of Solemn Judgment, it really will be an almost metagame contender, but at the very least a very good rogue deck. At number 1, we have sort of a tricky situation because I'm only doing one of these like 10 winners from the ban listing. I'm not really talking about the meta decks. I wanted to talk about the rogue decks, and this one right now is a rogue strategy, but I feel like after this ban list and the new format, it might be a meta strategy, but I still want to include it in this video. Pendulums have a very dedicated fan base, and they're actually pretty competitive as a rogue deck, and a lot of people really like that strategy, especially when you can go first and just full combo your opponent. You can end with some of the scariest boards in Yu-Gi-Oh, but it never was the best combo deck of last format. I mean, Thunder Dragon and regular Orcus, like the pure version of Orcus, was just more consistent, more resilient, better going second, but I think now that the more pure version of Orcus will be out of the metagame, I think now that Thunder Dragons have taken a bunch of hits, I think Pendulum Orcus might be like one of the best combo decks out there. Like, unironically, I'm saying that. I think Pendulum Orcus specifically just has so many extenders, so many crazy cards they can play. You can do your normal Pendulum combos, and if your opponent stops those, you can just do an Orcus combo, and I think that one of the cool things about this deck is it doesn't really need Rusty to do those combos. It can still just do your normal plays and just add the Orcus cards to your already strong Pendulum board, and it doesn't play a field spell, so you can just play that Orcus field spell and set up the Dingirsu in the graveyard. I think that this deck could be a very viable contender going forward. I don't know where to put it on this list, but right now Pendulums are a rogue deck, so they will make the rogue winner video, but I think that this deck does have a very strong chance of being one of the best decks going forward. We'll just have to wait and find out how good Pendulum Orcus actually is when we go to like the UDS and the YCS and regional season. At the very least though, it'll be a strong rogue contender, borderline tier 1, but definitely at least tier 2. Anyway though, I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching today's discussion video. Which decks did I leave off this list? You know, this was originally going to be a top 5 list or a 5 winners list, but there were just so many decks that I felt got supported from this last ban list. I really think that Konami made a bunch of smart changes, especially in releasing and unrestricting older cards that didn't really need to be on there in 2019. I'll see you later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.